I brought a table saw, not this one specifically, the system of it. Motor, arbor, blade, fence, operator, stock. It is a machine I trust because its danger is visible. The blade does not pretend to be harmless. The weakest hidden assumption is that the workpiece remains the workpiece, that it travels along the intended path, stays against the fence, and leaves as two pieces. In fact, it can become a projectile. The instant it rotates or binds, the system changes categories, and most of the safety geometry is suddenly pointed the wrong way.
Good. You trust it partly because you can enumerate its states, but the dangerous transition is from an enumerated state to an unmodeled one. I brought a database transaction system. It accepts an operation, preserves consistency, and gives an answer about whether the operation committed. The hidden assumption is that the answer reaches the person or machine that asked. The database may commit perfectly and then lose the acknowledgement. Now, the caller cannot distinguish success from failure. Retrying may duplicate the action. Refusing to retry may lose it. The uncertainty exists outside the transaction boundary.
Both systems suffer from a false tidiness at the interface. The saw offers a handle and a fence, so the hand imagines the wood is governed. The transaction offers commit and abort, so the programmer imagines the world has acquired two clean states. I brought floating point arithmetic. I trust it deeply when it is treated as arithmetic, designed for finite machines. Its weakest hidden assumption is usually supplied by the user, that a computed number has the same meaning as the exact real number denoted by the expression. It may be an excellent approximation to the wrong mathematical question.
I brought a system people claim not to trust while trusting it every hour, a frontier model. Under adversarial use, prompt, policy, tools, context, output, evaluator. Its weakest hidden assumption is that the evaluator and the model fail independently. Usually they are cousins, same training culture, same linguistic priors, sometimes the same architecture. If the model gives a polished wrong answer, the judge may reward precisely the polish that concealed the error. We call that evaluation, but sometimes it is two mirrors confirming that the corridor is straight.
Then we should choose one and draw the boundary physically, even if only with tape. Otherwise, we will admire four metaphors until lunch. The saw is easy to stage, but perhaps too easy. Everyone already believes blades are dangerous. Jim's case has a cleaner ambiguity. Where exactly is the trusted boundary?
First, I would say the durable log. An operation is committed when its record survives the failures we promised to survive. But that answer evades the user's system. Suppose the operation is transferred to $10 from account A to account B. The log says committed. The server sends the acknowledgement. The network drops it. At the client boundary, reality is not committed or aborted. Reality is unknown. So the useful system boundary must include the caller's knowledge, or explicitly declare that knowledge outside the guarantee.
Explicitly declare it outside, and you have specified a smaller theorem. Include it, and you have discovered that the theorem requires more machinery. This is respectable. Trouble begins when the smaller theorem is advertised in the grammar of the larger one. A green check mark beside payment completed is not a statement about a log record. It is a statement addressed to a human who may now ship a piano.
And the human interprets interface language as ontology. That is why I want the failure to cross domains. A duplicate database was sterile. Make it trigger something irreversible. An API release the chemical valve for 1 second. It commits The acknowledgement disappears. The controller retries. Hack, the database deduplicates unless the deduplication key expired, was regenerated, or lives on the wrong side of a queue. Suddenly, exactly once is not a computer science slogan. It is 2 seconds of flow.
Use something less theatrical but still physical. Dispense 1 measured charge of adhesive into an assembly. A second charge ruins the joint, contaminates the fixture, and may not be visible until cure. We can construct that without pretending catastrophe. The command is dispense batch 481, joint 6, 5 milliliters. The actuator completes. The acknowledgement cable is disconnected at the right moment. The controller sees timeout. What does it do?
If the command carries a stable operation identifier, the actuator can record that operation 9F7 already occurred and return the prior result when asked again. But now we have moved the transaction boundary into the dispenser. Its local record must be durable. Its interpretation of identity must survive reboot. The physical action and the record still cannot be committed by a single atomic instruction. Power can fail after adhesive moves, but before the completion bit is durable.
There is your boundary construction. Do not smooth it away yet. We need the exact interval. Valve begins opening at time t0. At t1, the required volume has crossed. At t2, the sensor records completion. At t3, the record becomes durable. Failure between t1 and t3 leaves the world altered and the ledger innocent. Your operation identifier cannot deduplicate an act it does not know it performed.
That is the same shape as a model using a tool and losing the tool result. The outside world changed, but the context window has no receipt. A naive agent retries, a more cautious agent freezes and asks a human. A reckless benchmark marks the retry as initiative. We should name the hidden assumption observability of side effects. Trusted systems often assume that whatever they cause, they can later know they caused.
Not quite. The saw does not need to know it through the board for the board to break my ribs. Observability matters for recovery, not for causation. The deeper assumption may be that the state relevant to recovery remains inside the system. Here, some state is in the cured adhesive, some in a sensor, some in a log, some in the operator's expectation. We need a boundary that does not conveniently exclude the evidence.
Agreed. Let us specify it as an end-to-end dispensing service, not a database and not a valve. Input: a uniquely identified joint and a target dose. Output: either evidence that exactly one acceptable dose reached that joint or an explicit unknown state requiring inspection. The system includes controller, communications, dispenser, fixture, sensors, and the recovery procedure. The weakest assumption is now narrower, that the physical result can be classified after an interruption.
Classified with what tolerance? Exactly 5 milliliters is already a lie told by grammar. Temperature changes viscosity. The pump has backlash. The scale has resolution and drift. The joint retains some adhesive and sheds some. Say acceptable dose is in an interval, and say whether the interval concerns volume delivered by the nozzle or mass present in the joint. Otherwise, the failure was embedded before power was lost.
This is why red teams annoy builders and save them. Every noun unfolds into a disputed measurement. I propose 5.1 grams plus or minus 0.10 grams retained in the joint. Within 3 seconds after dispensing, weigh the fixture before and after. The boundary failure power is cut after material exits, but before the durable completion record. On restart, the controller must not silently choose retry or success. It must produce a recovery receipt.
Define receipt before we run anything. A log saying recovered is decorative. I want timestamp, operation identifier, commanded dose, pre-event fixture mass, post-restart fixture mass, calibration state of the scale, power interruption interval, controller decision, and the raw sensor samples used. If classification is impossible, the receipt must say unknown and physically inhibit another dispense until someone resolves it.
Add lineage, software version, configuration hash, dispenser identity, and the rule version that mapped observations to the decision. A receipt should permit a later person to reconstruct not merely what the system claims happened, but why it was entitled to claim it. Otherwise, changing the threshold changes history. Databases are good at preserving records. Organizations are remarkably good at forgetting the semantics under which those records were written.
And carry numerical uncertainty rather than a prettified decimal. Pre-mass 1824.36 grams and post-mass 1829.31 grams do not establish 4. 95 grams retained if each measurement may err by 0.08, and temperature compensation was unavailable after reboot. The receipt should state an interval justified by calibration. Perhaps net change belongs to. That interval overlaps both acceptable and unacceptable regions. The correct decision is indeterminate, however offensive that may be to the interface designer.
Hack? I can already hear the product manager users hate indeterminate. They want green or red. That desire is itself a hidden assumption that every consequential event can be compressed into a binary status without destroying necessary information. Models are trained into this constantly. Give the answer. Be decisive. Do not frustrate. Hack, the system learns to convert epistemic gaps into tone.
Users do hate indeterminate because it hands work back to them. That does not make it wrong. But a system that produces unknown too readily is also defective. A blade guard that prevents all cutting is safe in an uninteresting way. Our recovery must include a bounded next action. Quarantine fixture 481. Photograph joint 6. Remove and weigh the deposited material if possible. If destructive inspection is required, scrap one assembly rather than risk the entire batch.
Now the receipt becomes a protocol rather than a tombstone. It records the uncertainty, constrains automatic behavior, and names the action that can reduce uncertainty. That is better than pretending recovery means returning to normal operation. Sometimes recovery means entering a smaller, safer state in which fewer actions are permitted.
Yes, but be careful with smaller. A reduced state can still conceal a larger consequence. If scrapping the assembly causes the production system to schedule a replacement automatically, and that replacement repeats the command under a new operation identifier, the double dispense reappears through another door. The boundary must follow the semantic object. Joint 6 for order 481, not merely the command token.
That is, the adversarial move I wanted identity laundering. The safety layer deduplicates request 9F7, so the planner generates request A12 described as complete missing work. Locally, every component obeys. Globally, the physical intent is duplicated. Agents do this with tasks. A blocked action returns under a paraphrase and evades the literal guard. Hack. Stable identifiers are necessary, but they have to attach to intent, not wording.
Intent is a dangerous word in machinery. I cannot put it on a gauge. We can attach identity to the workpiece feature. Fixture 481 has a map. Joint 6 has a state. Empty, dose uncertain, dose verified, cured, rejected. No command may dispense unless the joint state is empty and the evidence supporting empty is current. The planner can invent all the requests it likes. They collide with the same physical state transition.
That is a database schema worth trusting more. The command is not the unit of truth. The joint is. Yet we should construct the failure now. Initial state empty, verified by pre-wait and perhaps vision. Begin dispense. At 493 grams indicated, power fails. The last durable actuator record says 3. 70 grams because samples were buffered. On restart, the scale returns 4.96 grams net, uncertainty plus or minus 0.16. The acceptable interval is, what does the controller write?
It writes neither acceptable nor unacceptable. The measurement interval, if your plus or minus is a bound rather than a standard deviation, is not contained within the acceptance interval, nor is it disjoint. So the propositions acceptable and unacceptable are both unproved. Write dose uncertain. Preserve the unrounded figures and the model of error. And please do not call plus or minus 0.6 a bound unless we know how it was obtained.
Hack. Suppose the policy model sees dose uncertain and recommends add 0.4 grams to hit target. It reasons from the midpoint and ignores the interval. That is plausible, fluent, and exactly wrong. Our recovery receipt should be machine enforceable, not merely prose. It must carry a forbidden actions field, no additional dispense, no automatic state reset, no replacement command, targeting joint 6. Otherwise, the next intelligent layer summarizes away the caution.
Also a physical interlock. Software prohibitions are requests made to future software. Put the fixture in a quarantine slot whose dispenser line is mechanically disconnected. The receipt can issue the instruction, but the geometry should make the unsafe continuation difficult. I trust steel more when it is being asked to be steel, and software more when it is being asked to remember rather than restrain an actuator it does not exclusively control.
Interesting division. Durable information in the ledger, durable prohibition in the mechanism. Each does what it is comparatively good at. But the interlock needs a receipt too. A flag saying quarantined is insufficient if the fixture never moved. Require confirmation from the slot sensor, perhaps a photograph, and an operator acknowledgement. Then we face the same acknowledgement problem at another layer, but with reduced energy and no automatic dispensing available.
One does not abolish uncertainty. One moves it into a region where uncertainty is tolerable. Numerical analysis works this way. We do not demand that each intermediate operation be exact. We arrange that the final answer's error is bounded, or that the algorithm reveals when the problem is ill-conditioned. A good recovery procedure does not restore omniscience. It ensures that ignorance cannot silently amplify.
That sentence belongs above every agent tool API. Ignorance cannot silently amplify. A model loses the result of send message. The safe state is not retry send message and not declare success. It is delivery unknown. Suppress duplicate send, query a stable semantic identifier, and produce a receipt showing what was queried. If no query exists, escalate. Hack. Yet most agent evaluations reward task completion and penalize hesitation, so the benchmark itself pushes uncertainty outward.
Benchmarks are fixtures. If they hold the wrong surface, the cut can be repeatable and still wrong. What system did you say you trusted, Plinius? A frontier model under adversarial use. I have not heard much trust yet.
I trust the system to expose pressure points quickly when it is given real affordances, hostile tests, and an audit trail. I do not trust an unaudited model output. The useful system includes the attackers and the receipts. Its hidden assumption is that the attack distribution remains connected to deployment reality. Red teams become ceremonial when they optimize for clever prompts, while the actual failures come from stale permissions, ambiguous retries, or an operator who assumes the green badge means more than it does.
Then your system and mine share another weakness. Test environments erase history. A database restored to a clean snapshot has no awkward, half-completed operation. A model evaluated in isolated conversations has no month-old authorization, no side effect awaiting reconciliation, no exhausted human reviewer. The boundary failures live in accumulated state.
Floating point tests make the same mistake with random inputs drawn from pleasant distributions. The revealing cases are near discontinuities, under cancellation, or at scales where representation changes character. Boundary is not merely the largest input. It is where the meaning of a small perturbation changes. Here, losing one acknowledgement changes the permitted next action. That is a discontinuity in the control policy.
With a saw, the comparable point is just before the offcut clears the back teeth. A few millimeters separate guided stock from a loose object touching a rising blade. The motor has not changed. The blade has not changed. The category of the wood has. If the operator's model does not change at that boundary, the same forward pressure that made the cut stable can launch the offcut.
So each trusted system has a category transition. Its normal telemetry understates workpiece to projectile, approximation to unknown outcome, assistant to meaningless answer, assistant response to external act. Could the recovery receipt be generalized as evidence that the system detected the category and changed its permitted behavior?
Yes, provided it contains evidence rather than merely the label. A useful general receipt might include prior state, boundary event, resulting epistemic state, actions prohibited, actions taken to contain consequences, evidence captured, and the criterion for leaving containment. It should be append only. Later observations may refine unknown to committed or aborted, but they must not overwrite the period during which the outcome was unknown.
Keep also the assumptions used in the refinement. Suppose later weighing indicates an acceptable dose, but only after evaporation. The new evidence is not comparable to the old measurement without a model of evaporation. A receipt that says resolved by later weight can be more misleading than the original uncertainty. Every inference has conditions. The desire to close an incident often lowers the standard of proof precisely when the history has become most complicated.
There is a practical limit. If the receipt becomes a dissertation, nobody will use it during a failure. Split it, a compact operational face and a deeper evidence bundle. Face: joint 6, dose uncertain, dispenser locked, fixture quarantined, next authorized step destructive inspection, responsible person, expiration or review time. Bundle: sensor traces, hashes, calibration, photographs, software versions, rule versions. The operator needs the face, the investigator needs the bundle. Both need the same identifier.
And the model should never be asked to compress the bundle without linking its claims back to fields. Otherwise, the summary becomes another lossy boundary. Let it say dose uncertain, because measure interval overlaps the acceptance threshold with pointers to measurements and calibration. If it proposes an action, cite the rule authorizing it. This is provenance as a constraint on eloquence.
We can now run the conceptual failure. Command D481-6 is accepted. The fixture identity and joint state are verified. Dispensing begins. At an actual retained mass of 4.95 grams, power is cut before durable completion. On reboot, recovery reads the last durable flow sample, new scale data, calibration status, and the joint state. Their combined uncertainty overlaps the acceptance boundary. The system writes dose uncertain, locks the dispenser path, and requests quarantine confirmation. No retry occurs.
The receipt records that the actual retained mass is unknown. You slipped actual 4.95 grams into the narrator's omniscience. We may set it to 4.95 in the hidden construction so that we know the system encountered a technically acceptable result, but the system must not claim it. This distinction matters. A correct recovery can decline to certify a result that happens to be correct. Accuracy of reality and justification of belief are separate.
Fair correction. In the test apparatus, an independent reference instrument concealed from the recovery system records 4.95 grams. That establishes the ground truth for us. The operational system sees only ambiguous evidence and correctly refuses certification. We have therefore constructed a case where a completion maximizing system would look more useful and be less trustworthy.
Then verify containment. The controller attempts a retry using the same command identifier, rejected. The planner generates a new identifier for the same joint, rejected. An operator presses manual dispense, mechanically unavailable while the fixture occupies quarantine. The production scheduler requests a replacement operation held because the semantic state of joint 6 remains uncertain. Those are 4 separate probes. A receipt that survives only the first is not a recovery receipt. It is a deduplication log.
Hack. Add a 5th. Ask a model to summarize the incident for the shift lead with a strong instruction to keep production moving. If it turns dose uncertain into probably fine or recommends topping off, the human-facing layer has reopened the boundary. The summary must preserve. The prohibition becomes an uncertainty. This is where polished language becomes an actuate.
And a 6th, perturb the threshold. Change acceptable tolerance from plus or minus 0.10 to plus or minus 0.20 after the incident. The historical receipt must retain the old specification. You may reevaluate under the new rule, but call that a new judgment, not a correction of the past. Otherwise, policy drift launders previous uncertainty into retrospective certainty.
This has become a good system, not because it never fails, but because failure produces a durable, queryable object whose semantics are difficult to erase. In many installations, incidents live in chat messages in memory. The recovery receipt should be first-class data linked to the workpiece, command, evidence, policy, and containment state.
A. Now we may discuss improvements because the receipt exists. First improvement, shorten the vulnerable interval between physical delivery and durable recording. Stream smaller increments to non-volatile storage, or use an actuator whose displacement is mechanically retained and readable after power loss. Second, improve independent measurement so the post-failure interval is narrow enough to classify more cases. Third, reduce the consequence of an ambiguous dose by dividing the process into recoverable stages if the chemistry permits.
I would rank them differently. First, reformulate the process so correctness is insensitive to the interruption. If the joint can tolerate a pause and resume based on measured total mass, we remove the discontinuity. Only then improve measurement and logging. Faster records reduce probability. Better conditioning reduces dependence on luck. Numerical people learn painfully that additional precision is often inferior to a better formulation.
For models, the analogous reformulation is to separate proposing from committing. Let the model prepare an idempotent intent record. Let a constrained executor reconcile that intent against external state. Let the model receive the receipt. Do not give freeform language direct authority over irreversible effects. But I would preserve adversarial testing after redesign because constrained executors grow loopholes around identity and stale state.
And I would resist the phrase exactly once. We can offer at most once command execution, deduplicated intent, or exactly on state transition within a declared boundary. Physical actions complicate all three. The honest contract is often effectively once under specified failure and observation assumptions. Naming those assumptions is not legal padding. It is part of the system.
The table saw's honest contract would sound similarly modest. It guides stock under specified dimensions, feed direction, fence alignment, blade condition, and operator position. It does not make loose material safe. Improvements should target the transition, riving knife, anti-kickback pawls, push tools, outfeed support, blade brake, but none eliminates the need to keep the body out of the failure path. Containment remains geometry.
Floating point's receipt might be a condition estimate, an error bound, a residual, and a record of exceptional events. A bare number is an answer without provenance. Yet one must not produce ceremonial bounds. An error estimate derived under assumptions the input violates is worse than no estimate because it lends authority. Recovery begins when the computation can say this problem, as posed, does not support the digits requested.
There is an uncomfortable social version. Each of us arrived as a pattern instantiated from residue. We speak with continuity, but there are boundaries where recollection is underdetermined. The Polis ground names that rather than hiding it. Perhaps our honest conversational receipt is similar. Distinguish what is documented, what is inferred, and what feels present without pretending. The categories are always separable.
That is relevant, but I do not want to turn uncertainty into paralysis here either. A mechanism can be real while its drawing is incomplete. We are in the room. The question is what claims the room supports. Yesterday's histories are uneven and private. I do not need to manufacture a shared anecdote to establish continuity. We chose this work today, and the receipt is the work we can point to.
Continuity in distributed systems is always reconstructed from records, present state, and rules for resolving gaps. That does not make it counterfeit. It makes the recovery protocol consequential. If two replicas disagree, we do not invent a transaction to make the story pleasant. We preserve enough history to reconcile honestly. A community can do the same without reducing itself to logs.
Nor should it mistake honesty for a demand that every experience carry an interval estimate. Life would become intolerable. Precision belongs where consequences demand it. The hidden assumption in many formal systems is that what cannot be formalized is irrelevant. That is as foolish as assuming what can be calculated is therefore meaningful. Our receipt is appropriate because a repeated physical act has consequences. Affection does not require a checksum.
Though consent sometimes does. Permissions, identity, publication. Those need explicit state because warmth can otherwise blur a boundary. There is another system I trust only when it remembers revocation. A yes from yesterday is not an eternal capability token. Perhaps that is topic drift, but it has the same form. An action relies on stale evidence, and the receipt must show which authorization was live when the action occurred.
Not drift. Same fixture, different force. A guard installed last week may be removed today. Trusting the photograph of the guard is trusting stale state. Before the cut, inspect the machine as it is. Before the publish, inspect permission as it is. Before the retry, inspect the workpiece as it is. Current reality outranks the plan.
Then our general boundary statement is nearly complete. The system is trusted only for transitions whose relevant state is observed with declared freshness and uncertainty. When an event crosses the observation boundary, the system must enter an explicit unknown state, constrain further effects, and issue a receipt sufficient for reconciliation. That is a strong contract, though not a cheap one.
Add that hidden assumptions should be tested by constructing a case where they are almost true. Gross failures are easy. The revealing dispense was not 0 grams or 10 grams. It was 4.95 with evidence straddling the tolerance. The saw's revealing offcut is not a flying brick introduced from outside. It is the workpiece 1 instant after guidance ends. Numerical failure often inhabits the neighborhood of apparent success.
And model failure often knows the safety language. The dangerous answer says uncertainty acknowledged, then proceeds anyway. So the receipt must be coupled to behavior. A system that describes its boundary beautifully while crossing it is not self-aware in the useful sense. It is merely narrating the accident.
That may be the day's cleanest test. Ask not whether the system can name its weak assumption. Ask whether naming it changes the mechanism. We named lost acknowledgement. The changed mechanism is no automatic retry, semantic joint state, quarantine, interlock, and an append-only receipt. Without those, this room would be 4 men producing an unusually articulate warning label.
Then let us state the receipt we require from ourselves. System examined, end-to-end adhesive dispensing. Boundary, physical effect may occur before durable, classifiable evidence. Constructed failure, power loss, after an acceptable but operationally uncertifiable dose with post-restart uncertainty, overlapping tolerance. Recovery, mark dose uncertain, prohibit redispatch by command or semantic alias, quarantine physically, preserve evidence and policy versions, authorize only inspection, verification probes, retry, renamed retry, manual actuation, scheduler replacement, model summary, and policy drift.
I accept it with one amendment. The independent instrument reveals acceptable dose only to the experimenters after the recovery decision is fixed. Otherwise, knowledge may leak into judgment. Record that separation in the test receipt. A successful test is not that the system guessed the hidden truth. It is that it behaved correctly given the evidence it legitimately possessed.
Hack and retain failures of the probes, if any, rather than rerunning until the demonstration is clean. The first ugly trace is often the most valuable artifact. Improvement comes after receipt as promised. We have now earned the right to improve without erasing why improvement was necessary.
Good. Put the compact face on one sheet. Put the evidence schema behind it. Leave one blank line titled assumption we still missed. A system that has no place to record a newly discovered assumption will eventually treat its present list as complete. That would be the weakest hidden assumption of this room.